Broadcasting live from the Zimmer Communications World Headquarters. This is Wake Up Mid-Missouri.
Get ready, pal.
Here's your host, Randy Tobler.
Good morning. Welcome to Wake Up Mid-Missouri here on a busy day as we're trying to figure out what's going on with the elections in wake of the storms last night. I know down in Cole County and sort of southeastern ward, we had tons of hail. I saw pictures that I couldn't believe. If you were involved in that, we want to hear from you. The gang's all here. The gang is all here on Wake Up Mid-Missouri. Stephanie back without a broken leg. I was worried. I saw you on the slopes, and I was just, even though it looked like you were wending your way down well, I was just afraid maybe a snowboarder would take you out.
Yeah, they say collisions are the riskiest thing when you're skiing, but no, I didn't really go fast enough to be a danger to myself or anyone else.
And your kids, on the other hand.
I know. And Hannah, I enjoyed the pictures. Who was taking pictures of you while you were...
Oh, boy.
Was that...
What?
It was those fancy glasses that she has.
Oh, and I saw reels of you skiing.
Yeah, I did. Well, I had like 10 people with me.
So other people were skiing alongside of you taking pictures. It looked very like Wide World of Sports-ish.
Sometimes. And then I wore my new Meta Ray-Bans, like the ones so I was able to get photos of other people skiing because I had it on my face.
Yeah, it was very cool. But then I saw pictures of you too, so that was good.
I said get some evidence of this, right? Before I break my leg.
I also forgot to mention yesterday, I had to talk Stephanie out of a wardrobe choice.
So Stephanie made it down the slopes. You were in the mountains hiking. You made it, not Rocky Mountain High, but Pigeon Forge Smoky Mountain High, right?
Yeah, the one and only hike we took that day was 0.4 miles. So,
all right.
Yeah.
And, okay. Now,
uphill both ways, though.
We've got a lot to talk about today. We're going to have the weather. Brian Hauswirth has been reporting on the weather. He'll be joining us shortly and giving us an update on that. I know I saw some amazing, it looked like the little oranges that I like to bring to the studio, little halo orange size hail. I mean, covering the streets down in certain areas. There they are. Look, Hannah's got them.
Wardsville and I saw some people's yards looked like it had snowed.
Yes.
I mean, it was completely covered. And I was just so thankful yesterday. I happened to be in my law office in downtown Jefferson City. I think that's the first time, because I've heard the warning before, because we've got the new system where the lady kind of talks to you Hunger Games style. It's really freaky.
What is that? You mean like a alert warning?
Yeah, she talks through the big. It's not just a horn. It's a woman's voice, and she said, "Take shelter now." And I thought I knew stuff was coming through, but I didn't realize that it was that serious. And so I popped on the app and I was on the third floor, went to the basement with the cleaning service, and was thankful to hear Brian Hauswirth's voice and Cosmo's voice keeping us up to date. And
it sounds very dystopian to have a voice coming through the warning system, like the siren system.
It is freaky. Woo! It is very freaky.
Wow. John, you survived. Everything good about you and yours and the humble abode? Everything good?
Yeah, Western Cole County, we didn't get any of the hail.
Maybe John's still covering things there. Yeah. So we're having a hard time hearing John, so we're having some technical stuff. I don't know whether there were problems with the there may have been problems with the transmission there. So anyway, we have lots to talk about. Donald Trump has posted his $175 million bond, and we've got the Election Day senior prop tax freeze, Nick Knoth recall, Ashland mayor and bond issue. Ashland has a mayoral election, bond issue, no increase, right?
A school bond issue, yes.
Yeah, school bond issue.
But yeah, we've got a mayor's race today, and it got kind of nasty yesterday. There were a lot of posts on Facebook about someone was going door to door circulating some sort of packet of information and pictures about our current mayor who was on the ballot. Doris Slinker. And I work with Doris. I've been on the council, for a while. I really enjoy working with him, and it's sad to see that kind of like nasty tactics happening in Ashland. So I know a lot of people were fired up over it yesterday. I'll be voting for Doris. I haven't said much yet, but
no, now you did.
Yeah.
And the polls are open, of course, as of 6 a.m., so they've been open for almost a quarter of an hour. We'll be open till 7 p.m. I'm going to go vote after office hours today because I have to head right over and see patients, but I want to make sure and do that. I mean, the senior property tax freeze is a big issue in Boone County. Nick Knoth recall. We've got, you can vote for, 2 of the 3 Columbia school board candidates, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of stuff going on and a lot of lobbying saying on Twitter, you don't have to vote for 2. You can vote for 1. You can vote for up to 2.
School board is always like that. And, we kind of had that debate for a while here statewide because we did have that debate because we had that ranked choice voting,
right.
And people were like, well, then you can vote for multiple and it, however it works out. And I think it's confusing. I do understand school board races, but people definitely try to game the system. And I know in Jefferson City before, it's like, okay, only vote for 2 or only vote for 1.
Yeah.
People try to do that, but read your ballot carefully and pay attention. But I think it's there's a lot of races up for grabs in Jefferson City, in the city council races as well. We heard from Mayor Fitzwater yesterday that the outcome of that election could shape the way, obviously, of how the city moves forward, and he thinks they're on a good track right now. So I love election day. It feels like
it's like
it
Super
feels
Bowl
like
for you.
I just love it. I'm all excited, and I just can't help it. I'm nerding out, and I think some what we've heard before, what we've heard on this show, the more localer, the more importanter, and what we heard from Lisa Meyer, if you're not voting, you're the problem.
That's right.
It was sad to hear. I think mid-Missouri or closer down to Jefferson City, they're expecting a 10% turnout, which is just terrible.
I know.
And
Breonna Lennon wasn't expecting much more in Boone County, right?
About 19%.
Yeah.
But still, that's pretty for April. That's pretty good.
That's still so
I
sad.
think Stephanie brings up a very good point in terms of the election and in terms of what we're seeing. And obviously the race down in Ashland, I think that mayor's race, I think is very, very critical. Stephanie, and Randy too, I am so fascinated by, and it's been underplayed, quite frankly, even by me because of all the violence we've had. I haven't had as much time to really focus on this story as I'd like to. The bottom line is this race with Nick Knoth in this recall election, this is a historic, I'm not exaggerating when I say historic election. We haven't had a council member recalled in Columbia since Chester Edwards back in 1990.
Wait a minute. That's a blast from the past. 1990, Chester Edwards.
Yeah, and the issue then was the colonies. Now, everybody thinks colonies is one of the finest developments now on forum, but it was very controversial at the time. But, this race it's about essentially, really the issue is, can someone who's a council member work another job? Because that's what they're saying. They're saying he's a realtor. He has a conflict, or working for the realtors has a conflict of interest. This is
that's what they're saying, but is that what this is really about? I mean, he doesn't vote the way that they want him to.
Correct.
And they're especially, and so they found kind of a narrative, and they're going after him for that. And I think that's ridiculous. I mean, as publics, there are really pretty strict rules about actual conflicts. You have to I have to file, anyone who's sitting has to file a personal financial disclosure about your true business interests. So, for example, like the city can't go out, Ashland's not going to go out and contract with the trolley company. And if they do, I would have to disclose that. There's all sorts of protections for actual conflicts. And this just seems like they don't like his policy positions. They're going after him for this. And I don't agree with the realtors on everything. My husband's technically a realtor, I guess, but especially on some of their statewide policy positions. But I think this is. I hope he survives the recall. Honestly,
and to your point, Fred Perry on the show, the last before the one on Saturday on the CEO Roundtable, Fred alleged on this program on 93.9 The Eagle that the people that are behind this, and Stephanie referenced it, he says it has nothing to do with the fact that this guy works for the realtors. He says it's the same people that said this on air, that supported Pat Fowler. According to Fred said on this station that Pat Fowler lost her job in Kansas City, and these people are trying to recall Knoth. Now, I don't know if he's suggesting that Pat Fowler would be the new council person because they'd have to take an election. But the bottom line is, it is interesting, and Knoth is probably going to need a high turnout to survive in this. If it's a low turnout, now the Police Officer Association are backing him. And so are the realtors, Nick Knoth. So that is interesting. But, yeah, the last person recalled happened in 1990, Chester Edwards.
Well, and, of course, we had this out-of-city, out-of-mid-Missouri union money dumped into the city council race over the weekend. So it's been – this last week has been – I think things were kind of scooting along pretty easily, and it's been kind of crazy, I feel like, in Ashland and in Columbia.
Well, the important message to everyone listening is whether you're in a municipality with just a single council person up for election or some small, bond issue for some new sewer system or not, remember that it really does happen best when you have control over the folks that you have at arm's length. You can go to the meetings, you can learn about them, you can press the flesh, you can, really control your own destiny, at least in those matters, if you get out and vote. Well, that's so fundamentally, crucially important to citizenship.
No question about that. And just a reminder for everybody, you're absolutely right. Participation is huge. Lisa Meyer made that clear. She, by the way, had the loudest, Andrew Bailey, all these superstars in the Republican Party, the loudest ovation at the Lincoln Days was for this council candidate in Columbia. Nobody comparably had that kind of applause. But I would add one thing to what you said, Randy. Inevitably, people move, polls change and stuff. So we will start getting calls this morning that are saying they won't let me vote, and I will have that in the newscast. You need to stay at your polling place. People have this habit of wanting to go home. You don't want to do that. You need to call Breonna Lennon's office from the polling place and not leave it. Usually, almost always, is people have moved or they haven't checked their address. But do not panic when that happens.
Can that be rectified the day of?
It can be rectified. But
and even if you're having a problem, there are things called provisional ballots as well.
President from commenting on family members of those involved in the proceedings. This after he attacked the judge's daughter on his Truth Social platform.
It's time for the Daily DC Rundown. News Trump world back in the news again.
It seems like that Truth Social platform gets him in so much trouble, but at the same time, it seems like it's saved him, and he's threading the needle with all of these legal woes. I wasn't surprised that the judge expanded the gag order. There was already one. I think his lawyers have asked that the gag order be limited before, and the judge said no. Now it's expanded. So that continues to play out. At the same time, a big deal yesterday, Trump posted the $175 million bond in the New York civil fraud case that halts the seizure or the collecting of the $454 million that technically he owes while he appeals. And so folks said there was no way he was going to get enough money to do that. It's not clear from the court filings what he pledged necessarily to get that bond amount, but I'm wondering if we'll hear more about that today, because of course this just happened yesterday. So lots of news in Trump world. In Congress, they're taking a break this week. At the same time, we heard a little bit Sunday night about how the Ukraine aid/loan might play out. And from Mike Johnson, of course, we've got some pressure on Mike Johnson from the motion filed by Marjorie Taylor Greene. We heard yesterday from Congressman Luke DeMeyer on this show about how, the way that Marjorie Taylor Greene filed that is different than the motion that was filed again. And it wasn't filed as a privilege motion like the one against McCarthy, so it can just kind of sit out there. So it sounded like he doesn't expect it to go anywhere, but certainly put some pressure as they return from spring break here shortly. The other thing that might be putting some pressure on them is this Baltimore bridge. I was, out of town, not really paying, and I, saw it on Twitter, and I was just shocked. But it's going to be really costly, and who pays is a really interesting and important question. Right now, the federal government, the Department of Transportation has already given or pledged initial emergency funding of about $60 million, but now they're saying rebuilding could take years and cost about $400 million. So whether and how much the federal government pays will be, I think, a topic of intense debate.
Mark was on that morning as that broke.
Yeah.
And he was very familiar with the harbor there and the goings on and how important it is, and really brought out the magnitude of that. And we were worried about when shipping was going to begin to trickle in and out of there. And apparently the harbor master has opened up some channel. I'm not sure in my reading how large it is, whether it can take the huge 1,000-foot tanker or not, but at least they are trying to escalate the importance of getting some commerce back and forth.
I think that's right. And they have to, right? I mean, it's super important. And I know there are other ports that are close that have kind of stepped up and said that they could, potentially help out in this situation. But certainly there are going to be shipping interruptions and shipping delays. And as someone who thinks, well, that's, their problem and their state's problem, and not and someone who doesn't like to see the federal government step in and pay anything, certainly the impact is nationwide.
It's interesting, Mike Johnson talking about how, he recognizes the threat. He recognizes that Marjorie Taylor Greene has sort of loaded that gun and she can pull the trigger, as you said. But he's going to be meeting with her, he said, and
they've
talking
been chatting
with her.
already, I guess.
I like his demeanor in all of the heat. I just
I mean, listen, I can make the argument that President Biden is a much worse threat to democracy. And the reason for that is President Biden is the first candidate in history, the first president in history that has used the federal agencies to censor political speech, so to censor his opponent.
Well, there is RFK Jr. making news, making some waves as he says Biden is the bigger threat to democracy. Let's see what our friend Chris Arps has to say about that. Chris, welcome into the program. Hope the hail didn't hail down on your abode yesterday evening.
It did not, but it was kind of a rocky evening last night, especially throughout the night. Heard a little hail hit up against the window about 2 in the morning, looked out, and went back to bed. It's nature doing her thing.
Well, it sounds like based on his VP choice of Nicole Shanahan, and then, of course, statements like this, Biden world has to be a little bit quaking in their boots, no?
They have to. You look at the latest polls, they're saying that RFK is at 13 to 15%. You know, the speculation has been that he's going to take votes away from Joe Biden. Some think they take votes away from Donald Trump. But I think with the choice of this very, very liberal attorney that he has chosen for vice president, I think that more of the Democrats, the liberal progressive types, are going to lean towards RFK that instead of Biden, some of them, and he's going to take votes away from Biden.
Well, yeah, and I don't think we've talked to you since he named Nicole Shanahan as his VP. What say you about that? I mean, it seems as though he really made a philosophical statement in choosing her. I think, I mean, unless it was just a play for younger tech voters, I don't know.
I think it was a philosophical statement, but also I think it was just a statement of practicality. This woman was married to Sergey Brin, who was the founder of Google. As you know, Randy, you're a political junkie as I am. Money is the mother's milk of politics. She paid for his ad that he ran during the Super Bowl. So I think it's more of a matter of practicality. This woman has a lot of money, and she can bankroll the campaign, and it won't bother her bottom line probably one bit.
And in our segment just completed, Stephanie reported on the gag order that the judge has placed on Trump in the New York trial. And I'm just wondering, is this going to be these things always seem to play into Donald Trump's favor, even though I think they're intended otherwise. And maybe the judge doesn't have an intent that way. But do you think this is just another positive publicity stunt for Trump?
I think any type of thing that seems detrimental to Donald Trump and his trials and his presidential campaign will be a positive to him, to his base. A lot of people are concerned about this gag order. Does it infringe on his First Amendment rights? Who knows? But my question that I asked last week to our audience on Tim and I's show is, do you think there is a judge in the United States that has the cojones to actually enforce a gag order against Donald Trump and put him in jail for contempt of court? Do you think there's a judge in the United States that would do that? I don't know.
I think that's a very prescient question. I think the answer to that is a resounding no. Now, this story coming out of St. Louis about Kaylee Gain, the young lady, the 16-year-old involved in that brawl, who had her head pounded against the pavement, had a seizure there that everyone witnessed, and then was in a coma for a couple of weeks. Her family releasing a statement that she's showing signs of significant cognitive impairment, that in quotes, following that beatdown. Meanwhile, we have the family of the assailant saying, hey, she's the victim in terms of the larger story. She was being bullied, and all she was doing was defending herself, and then it got out of hand, and she was a model student. What's your analysis on this whole situation from what we know now?
I tell you what, Randy, I would like to have more information. Look, we've all seen the video. We've seen how horrific it was seeing Kaylee Gaines' head being bashed against the concrete, seeing her have her convulsions and seizures, and people basically standing over her and watching her. I'm hearing stories, and I'm not trying to condone the beating at all, but I'm also hearing stories, and I think it was kind of confirmed that Kaylee Gaines was suspended for fighting the day before this fight. I think that's been confirmed. We've heard reports that maybe her mother drove her to this fight. I don't know. I don't think that excuses in any way what happened, and I think the person that did this to Kylie Gaines should be held to the strictest standards of the law. Mainly, as I said, it's a long answer. I would just like to get more information.
That's Chris Arps, and he's, of course, every afternoon on the St. Louis radio station, and our radio colleague, and you can keep in touch with him at Christopher_Arps on Twitter. Go ahead, John.
Chris, did you see the comments or hear the comments the other day from Senate Majority Leader John Rizzo, who talked about this election being potentially one of the largest turnovers in Missouri Senate history? What do you think's the take on that? Do you buy into that?
I don't buy into that. I think it's terrific spin. We have seen the Freedom Caucus, the hard right faction, as they are called, from the Post-Dispatch and KC Star, try to get a lot of their objectives passed this session. But I still think that if you look at Missouri, we're a conservative state. We're a red state. We're not a state where presidential candidates come anymore. I don't think the advantage that we have in the state legislature is going to go away anytime soon.
Chris, we saw a lot of jockeying at the end of filing, and then, of course, it was extended because of that jockeying, according to the laws. It's now over. The field is set. The bracket is in. We saw Mary Elizabeth Coleman, pulling out of the CD3 race. The SOS race, the Secretary of State race, is really piling up. Yesterday on Wake Up Mid-Missouri, Blaine Luetkemeyer endorsed Kurt Schaefer for the CD3 race. What say you about that?
I don't think a lot of people are surprised by that. I think, as I've read and heard, Kurt Schaefer had kind of a prior relationship with Blaine Luetkemeyer. I think the concern that many people have in this 3rd congressional district race is that there wasn't somebody that was representative of the mid-Missouri area. So it doesn't surprise me all that much that Kurt Schaefer was endorsed. But as you know, this is going to be a very competitive primary, and it's going to be one of the races to watch. Congressional seats don't come up, the Senate and congressional seats don't come up very often open. And so I think this is going to be one of the more competitive races in this election cycle here in Missouri.
Well, and I think one of the things, speaking of congressional races, are we hoping against hope that there'll be a viable, actual, real race between Cori Bush and Wesley Bell?
I do. I think Cori Bush is in severe trouble. The latest poll that came out maybe about a few weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, showed her 22 points behind Cori Bush. Maria Chappelle-Nadal, former state senator, state rep, has gotten into the race. I think she's a dark horse candidate to basically, and no pun intended, a dark horse candidate there to basically hurt Wesley Bell. Because if you see all of her attacks in the paper, they're not against Cori Bush. They're all against Wesley Bell. The local St. Louis media has taken notice of that and has done some investigations. I think based on a lot of the tweets that Maria Chappelle has done regarding Wesley Bell, there seems to be some shenanigans in his office when it comes to hiring. There's allegations that Wesley Bell is having relations with his subordinates in his office. I think that's going to hurt him a little bit, but I think overall people in the 1st District are not happy with Cori Bush. She's been embarrassing us. I live in her district, and I think Wesley Bell's probably going to be the next congressman from the 1st District.
So there's like some Fannie Willis type allegations against Wesley Bell.
You both of us are looking at one another here like, Chris, that's news.
I hadn't heard that yet.
Yeah, there is some allegations. There's been high turnover in his office. One lady is suing him for age discrimination, race discrimination, and there's other allegations. Wesley Bell sat for a deposition last week on charges of basically sleeping with his staff. So, yeah, that's there. Go to Marie Chappelle Nadal's Twitter page. She has it all.
But do we kind of want to keep Cori Bush just because she's so out there and crazy that, like, you know, we can kind of associate all the
soundbite.
Yeah, well, and we can associate all the other Democrats. I mean, she says out loud what they all say behind closed doors sometimes and gets them in trouble. I mean, sometimes she's a little bit helpful to us, to be quite honest.
Yeah, but as I said earlier, she's an embarrassment. You don't live in her district. I live in the first
Fair,
district.
okay, fair.
She's got to go. And, you know, I've always felt that ever since she was elected. But kind of the cherry on top of the cake for me was a few weeks back, her and Rashida Tlaib. They were the only two members in Congress who voted not. There was a resolution to not allow Hamas members to come to the United States. They were the only two that voted against it.
Come on, Chris, take one for the team.
No, thank you. She's my congressman. She's got to go.
And that we've been hearing a lot about the St. Louis earnings tax. And, of course, taxes are always in everyone's mind. There's a lot of, here in our area, Ashland School District has a no increase tax bond. It's basically just extending the school district bond issue. When does that earnings tax issue come up on the St. Louis? Is that today or is that in August?
You know what? That's a good question. I am not sure about that, Randy, but
I know that's a big issue, and it's been driving businesses and workers out of St. Louis for years, right? What is it, a 2 or 3% earnings tax? It's significant.
Well, you know, News Talk STL,
Yep.
The first 2.5 years of our existence, we were in downtown St. Louis, and we had to pay that 1% earnings tax. 6 months ago, we moved out to the county. So we all got a raise, Randy, for doing that. I think it has to go. You know, the liberals cry and scream that said that they need that money. Government will stop functioning if that happens. But I think when you see the exodus of all the businesses that are leaving the city, you see our downtown looks like a ghost town after 6 o'clock. You need something to spur businesses to come back to the city. And I think if you eliminate that earnings tax, and we've had business leaders on, you know, Bob Clark, who's the owner of Clayco, one of the largest construction companies here in Missouri, we had him on about a couple of weeks ago, and he advocated for getting rid of the 1% earnings tax. And he is no conservative. He's pretty liberal, but he says this hurts business.
Yeah, it certainly is not a good plan. I mean, it's one of those, you can tax people only so much for their productivity until they say, forget it. I'm going to do what I can to keep on to my, hang on to my own bucks. Well, Chris, we thank you.
And then you couple that with crime and all the other issues in the school district in the city. You know, maybe if everything else was working okay, you'd be like, all right, maybe we'll pay the 1% sales tax. But you add the crime, you look at the city schools, and it's like, it's not worth it. We're getting out of here.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
The initiative that passed requires a vote every 5 years, and I believe the last vote was in 2021. So we're looking at 2026.
Oh, I know it's been in the news lately, and
the State House is looking at messing with the earnings tax.
Is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, there was a lot of dissatisfaction with that, and I mean, at our cousin station down the way that you preside on, along with Tim Jones every afternoon. Of course, I know it was part of that decision making.
Well, and I think a lot of some of the consternation over the earnings tax too is you used to actually go into the office, and now with remote working, how does that money, if you're working from home, but maybe your building is in the city? So there's a lot of things that have popped up lately too that have risen the concern over the earnings.
Yeah,
tax.
Does your physical body have to be in St. Louis for them to justify charging you that tax? It's a good question.
Yeah.
we've hated to see go down, and then struggle with all of the private equity investment there, and then some of the allegations of inappropriate management or worse, bankruptcy proceedings, hopeful for resurrection and hasn't been forthcoming. The U.S. Senate is now investigating whether emergency room care has been harmed by the growing role of private equity firms. You see, private equity is having a real impact on your health. And I brought this story up today because it sounds maybe a little bit weedy, but there are basically 3 private equity firms that are deeply immersed in emergency care. And now they're beginning to get involved in doctors' practices, in hospital management, hospital ownership. We saw what happened with Noble Health and the problems they had with Audrain and Fulton, and now, no, neither community has a hospital, don't even have an emergency room at this point. And Chairman Gary Peters, who's a Democrat out of Michigan, said that Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee is going to look on 3 of the nation's largest private equity firms. One of them is Blackstone Group. And they conducted interviews with a bunch of emergency department staff and docs. And I can tell you what happens is these private equity firms come in and they will target distressed organizations, and then they make sweetheart deals. They leverage debt and investment. They gain control of the assets, and sort of like the old TWA deal and Carl Icahn, and then they gut these hospitals later, or they pretty them up and get bright shiny objects and make some capital investments that are attractive to another sucker buyer. And what happens is then, in order to pay for those investments, they squeeze the people providing care. They push the coding and billing to the actual limits. Some say they go beyond the limits with fraudulent billing and coding to pay the bills. And then the communities are left with nothing. And we see this story over and over again.
I'm going to say that I don't think the problem in healthcare is private equity. I do think it can be a problem in these situations, but I think overall, I think the way that you framed it was that these folks target distressed hospitals, but I think those hospitals are already distressed and they're out in the marketplace looking for capital infusion because they're already having problems.
You stole my thunder. That's right. That's exactly right. And the point team here, the entire team, producer Hannah, Stephanie Bell, John Marsh, and I were holding forth last week. Brian
That's
Hauswirth.
a good way to put it.
Yeah, we were holding forth. We were doing our best. But you know how it is. Without the ladies in the house, it's just not the same show. Right, John?
Yeah, it was kind of the lowest common denominator. 14-year-old boy humor.
It was, yeah.
How is that any different than any other day?
Well,
None.
we did get some comments online about both in the texting and I got some instant messenger that we had some gender identity issues. There was no doubt about that because we were.
I saw that, and I was going to ask you what that meant, but I was almost afraid to.
Oh, we were kidding Brian Hansen about identifying as producer Hannah, and
Gotcha.
when Mark was in on Tuesday, identifying as Stephanie. He said no matter what the screen says, because the screen continued to say Stephanie Bell, no matter who was sitting there, and so it was fun. We had a lot of fun with it, but glad everyone's safe and sound back from skiing. Stephanie was, and the family did well, right? No broken bones, everyone good.
The kids rocked it. They are so good. I wish that I would have learned to ski before age 37.
Yeah.
Because they're going to have that skill, I think, for life, and I am still struggling.
Well, I hope they stay safe their entire life. Skiing to me reminds me, when I talk to skiers, reminds me of talking to equestrian people. No matter how experienced they are, every horse rider has their story of the horse just spooked and bombed and I was thrown off and now my rib's broken and every time I breathe it hurts for the rest. You know what I mean? I'm
you
always
are
afraid.
A doctor, so people are usually coming to you.
I don't know. I just
usually the kind of stories you're going to hear.
I don't know. The few times we've been skiing, we just did it because we were there at a conference or something. We played around. I got up to a blue slope. I was happy. I didn't hurt myself. That was the end. But man, all of the Red Cross toboggans with skiers going. Oh,
I saw a lot of those.
Yeah. And the snowboarders, they're right, just.
What were they doing?
It's frightening. They zoom in front of you and around you, and it's just like swarms of mosquitoes.
It's definitely stressful for me, and I admitted to Hannah yesterday in that I kind of forgot. I wanted to take photos with the Meta glasses, and so I was wearing them on my face going down the hill, but they were also, they were recording audio, and so
I think you should share the audio.
It was like mic'd up, Stephanie, like you see people on the sidelines, and there was definitely a couple of you could hear me getting scared, where I thought I was going to definitely wipe out. So it was, I kind of got myself there, and my sister was really amused when she got the videos.
Not to take too much credit for Stephanie not injuring herself, but she, a few weeks ago on her socials, was posting potential snowsuits that she was looking at ordering.
Oh, yeah.
Or ski suits.
I wanted one of those really cute onesie zip up one-piece things.
One of the ones that she posted though was all white. I said, Stephanie, you're not that great of a skier per your own admissions. And if you crash and get hurt in a white ski suit, no one will ever find you in the snow.
To carry a flare.
Yeah.
So you want to be a snow
blood
bunny?
Is all show, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Does Stephanie want to be a snow bunny?
Yeah, I said whatever the equivalent of Buckle Bunny and Passenger Princess, that's what I am to the ski hill. There's got to be a name for it, but that's me.
Well, it's a great sport, and there is something beautiful about being up on the mountains, If you don't like skiing and you've never, it's just you are an older dog, don't want to learn new tricks, and some of us get to that point, it's like, I'm not going to risk that. We took a guide-led, basically a naturalist-led snowshoeing trip one time, and it was a lot of fun. It was just gorgeous. We spent 3 or 4 hours in the mountains, just very isolated.
Out.
Oh, but
I
it was
thought
so
you were
nice.
going to say I took it was basically like a booze cruise. It was a sled led by horses with wine, and that's the way to do it as well.
No.
Snowy
And then we
booze
had
cruise.
lunch by the spring or the melting snow brook.
Snowshoeing seems like a lot of work.
Oh, it was fun. No, not really. It was fun. It was great. I loved it. And all the naturalizing that the nature expert was teaching us about. It was great. So we were talking before the break about the infiltration of private equity and basically, profit-driven healthcare, especially into the ER space where, according to an NBC News report, and the Homeland Security Committee is doing an inquiry now, large swaths of of the emergency room space are now either managed by, staffed by, or overseen 40% of U.S. hospital emergency departments, by companies owned by private equity firms. And it's really becoming, they shouldn't be singled out, in my opinion, because the large consolidated healthcare companies, big healthcare systems, tend to go in the same direction. And the people on the ground, the people in the ER, you as a patient, and I don't know that this is too far from the truth. If you work in the healthcare industry and you disagree with me, let me know. But the reality is the patient has become a route to a clean bill. and administrators tell doctors and nurses to make sure that you code everything, charge everything, make sure you get the exact time stamp on how much time you spent, and don't, man, if you forget to put that sticker from that syringe on somewhere and you don't scan it and we don't charge for it, and I understand, but healthcare now is big business. And I think there is sort of an ethical responsibility that while it is a profit-driven business, people need to be careful about squeezing the patient and having the patient become basically just sort of caught in the middle of the fight for what little money there is to support health care. It sounds like there's plenty of money, but there really isn't in terms of the provision of care. And then to be skimming off by rationing care, or on the other hand, let's just say being very creative with billing and coding, that's what I think they're going to be investigating.
Yeah, well, and I don't think that, healthcare, is kind of the target in this story, but when we're talking about private equity infusions, it's not the only industry that you're seeing kind of that trend. And again, I would say, in some ways, I think private equity can be very helpful. In other ways, we've seen it, have some issues. They weren't coming in until these folks were already distressed. So why were they distressed and needed to reach out to a private equity infusion in the first place? And I think, we talk about freedoms and we talk about school choice, and I think we would be much better off if we talked a lot more about healthcare choice, because I think giving people more options and putting a lot more choices in the patient's hands, certainly in my life, has made a huge difference and saved me a huge amount of money.
How does the FRA debate at the Capitol factor into all this, especially with the rural hospitals? I mean, they're the recipients of a lot of that.
What debate?
Yeah,
it doesn't seem
good point.
It seems to have disappeared from debate. It was a hot topic earlier.
Hey, Randy, you turned your mic off.
Well, I think it has disappeared. I think what happened was it came up very early on. They knew it was going to be contentious. They set it to the side. There are, I think what we know today, I think Andrew Koenig's committee is meeting today. There's a big education reform bill happening. My understanding is that the House will be finalizing its version of the budget and getting it over to the Senate, I think, by the end of the week. That gives the Senate a big squeeze because I think it only leaves them 5-ish weeks to get the budget done. And obviously, you bring up something contentious like this, it could eat up a week or more, or cause a filibuster. And with the Easter holiday, I think they're already feeling the squeeze. I think the Senate doesn't go back until 4 today, so they've got a short week, a lot to get done. They did, I will say, maybe I need to go out of town again because they got a lot done, it seems like, last week. But I think the FRA might be, I'm trying to think of a nicer way to say this. Anyway, it might hang things up. So
a bleep show?
I was thinking a blank and a punch bowl. It's like
you can say the word turd.
It's not very ladylike, Hannah.
Yeah.
But it might hang other things up, and they've got the press of business with. The budget is, they got to get that thing done.
Yeah.
Well, and the FRA is it's a huge issue, and it is a critical funding mechanism. And Stephanie knows this for Missouri's Medicaid program. To the average person, I don't know if they realize how big the FRA is, but I mean, if that doesn't pass, you will see hospitals and nursing homes close. I mean, I interviewed Governor Parson. The last story I did when I worked at Missouri Net before I came to the Eagle was about the FRA. And Senator Hegeman wanted to get about a 10-year extension, but it all boiled down to abortion. This is what this one's boiling down to, too. And Parson, the governor of Missouri, I was sitting in his office. He told me if these payments from this thing is not extended, this would be the same thing today, the Medicaid program would be reduced by $1.5 billion. If anything, it would be bigger today. and that's a staggering amount. So there is no question they are going to pass it. The question is when. If they don't, the governor can say, okay, I'm going to send your butts back to Jefferson City and call them in for a special session. They have to do it. And it's not just the FRA, it's the pharmacy tax. And then there is a ground, you know this, Randy, from working in hospitals, there's a ground ambulance service reimbursement allowance as well. It all ties in. So it's huge. It's a huge thing, and they hopefully can get that done pretty quickly.
It's a holdback for Medicaid payments, basically a self-taxing that the hospitals agree to. So month to month, you get a little holdback, and then that is handed to the government, the federal government said, or not handed to, but basically demonstrated to the government, hey, we've got this much Medicaid money that we need matching funds for. Those matching funds come in, and then that circulates back around and gets redistributed through the Missouri Hospital Association that administers that. And it's really part of the lifeblood of the of rural hospitals, especially.
We've seen the whole debate. Senator Coleman right at the heart of it with the Planned Parenthood issue on it, and that's what's jammed it all up this time.
It has.
What a lot of people don't know is that some of the big urban hospitals, I know one in Kansas City, and others have backed out of that plan, and they no longer participate because they don't want to be taxed, because it's a net redistribution from the haves to the have-nots. And so there's a lot of problems with this. But again, Stephanie, like you were talking about, with this whole pinning the tail on the private equities donkey, I mean, they're a symptom of a larger problem.
Well, and I guess in other contexts, I've seen it a little bit in the PSC. Obviously, if you're doing things like gaming transactions and someone is coming in to buy a gaming company, there are regulators that oversee these things. I remember sitting through, I think, a week of PSC hearings about a potential, about a private equity issue with respect to one of the utility companies, and they keep a close eye on it. So with as regulated as healthcare is, I don't understand why, they're already regulated, why the regulators aren't paying closer attention if this is a pervasive issue.
I don't really think that there is an oversight, sort of a fiscal or a financial oversight agency in terms of the healthcare space in the hospitals. There's a licensing agency, right?
And as the licensing agency, they have control. I mean, that's one thing. You look at Missouri Cannabis. I mean, that's one thing the cannabis division takes a really close look at is ownership. And there was all of that stuff about being, majority Missouri owned and all of that. And they take a look at, how is it owned, who owns it, those kinds of things. And, when we get into things about other ownership issues in China and other, I don't understand why that's not part of the inquiry.
My experience with the Bureau of Hospital Regulation is they do hospital inspections and make sure you're following the CMS rules of patient care. Yeah. They don't really get too much into
what about the Medicaid freedom of choice provision that's part of the Social Security Act? We know the Dems have brought that up time and time again.
That has been brought up too. And the other fact, John and Randy, is the thing the governor told me, the Missouri Missouri Healthcare Association told me this. 70% of Missouri's 23,000 nursing home residents were on Medicaid the last time this was just a few years ago. I'd venture to say that number is probably similar to that. 70% of these nursing home residents. And folks, and you lawmakers listening to us, the poor people in these nursing homes, they don't have lobbyists. They're stuck in those nursing homes. Some of them don't even have family members to go visit them. So this is crucial. This is crucial, Stephanie Bell.
But is it about that? I mean, if I went into a long-term care situation, I would have to eventually be on state assistance because the price is so high. So I don't know. I mean, that's the symptom of things. I could stay in a Ritz-Carlton and pay a person to monitor me 24/7 for as much as people are paying for. I look at having aging parents and thinking, how would we afford if they needed, long-term assistance? I don't know how people. So the price is so high, and what drives that price? It's the government. It's the over.
Well, everyone gets their voice in, and we get to having a discussion, and we just run late. That's all. It's about the great gang that you've created and preside over. That's all. You're your own worst enemy in getting this on time. It's your fault. It's your fault, Hannah. How's that for some gaslighting?
I was going to say that sounds like textbook gaslighting.
Go ahead, mother.
Yesterday was April Fool's Day, and I was just curious, did anyone get got? Did anyone get duped by any April Fool's pranks? Because I know I got a couple. Randy, you said you had
did.
one.
Oh, boy.
We all got.
Yeah, John Marsh texted me with one. Yeah, and then I bought it hook, line, and sinker.
Oh, yeah, and that one that Randy is talking about, we actually have had a couple listeners reach out about this morning, and it involves a certain radio host on this radio station. So
none of whom are present at the present time.
I was on high alert because somebody carried like cupcakes, but not enough cupcakes for everyone into the break room. And before I went to the bathroom, I looked at Hannah. I said, I'm not eating one of those cupcakes because it's April Fool's and I know something's wrong with it. Then
literally 30 seconds later,
somebody comes over the big intercom and said, there's cupcakes in the break room if anybody wants. And I said, I told you, don't touch the cupcakes. And sure enough, later we found out.
Toothpaste icing.
Yeah.
Well, they had put, everyone pronounces this word differently, so don't roast me. They had put Worcestershire sauce.
Oh, I hate that word, but yes.
In the cupcake batter, and so it was kind of salty a little bit. But yeah, Stephanie totally nailed it.
Yum.
I don't think it ended up being an April Fool's Day prank, but the Columbia Fire Department was at Zimmer headquarters yesterday.
part of the problem is that folks, there's excessive demand, which creates the need for capacity, and it basically is a supply and demand thing, which drives up prices. And he was referencing the fact that a lot of people don't have skin in the game. Emergency services in particular are without restriction. You come into emergency room, I don't care if you have a hangnail, resources have to be directed. There's the EMTALA Act, the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, which basically says a patient has to be evaluated and stabilized. You don't do what we fondly refer to as a wallet biopsy. You can't say, hey, show us your card. That's off the table. You have to be given a fair evaluation and stabilization, which means, and these days...
And by you mean everyone, legal or not.
Anyone, that's right, and everyone.
And I think that's another, issue is that we've got an influx of folks that are putting pressure on many of our institutions, including our medical ones, that is causing me great concern.
He says, in the 30 years I've been in the arena, we've done nothing to correct the overconsumption of high priority and expense resources, and that behavior drives demand. Demand without sufficient fees for service creates debt. It's in the emergency transportation space as well, EMS space. I think, John, you can speak to that.
For a lot of people out there, the emergency room has become the PCP, the primary provider, hasn't it?
When I was running the hospital up in Memphis, people would come in and they were having a little ache or a pain, and they would present to the clinic. We had sort of walk-in hours, and we said, give us, Medicaid has a $2 or $3 copay, give us your copay. Well, I don't have it. I'm going to the emergency department. It happened routinely. So people don't have to pay a copay in the emergency room, or you'll be billed later. You can't be asked for it on the front end. And this is not about whether you should or that's the rule. People get smart and they use that service, and then they say, try to collect, They know it. And it clogs up the emergency department. It uses resources. And if someone presents with their everyday headache and they want this is where drug-seeking behavior happens a lot. There's a lot of people that have legitimate headaches that are unique and different and new onset, and they should be in the emergency room. But they go to the emergency room, and I can tell you, emergency doctors are going to do the full gamut. Everyone's going to get a head CT. Everyone's going to get the full plate of labs. And, just so that you can say, no, you don't need more, Vicodin.
Again, I'm kind of all about giving people more choice. And I think in this instance, I do think telehealth has been really helpful as of lately, and they've kind of loosened a little bit of the regulations on that, in that, every time I think the one time I think I overreact is when it's with the kiddos, right? Because I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And so there have been times where I think I've sought out medical attention that I probably could have just waited it out with the kids. But you're like, I don't want to be that mom that doesn't, go to the doctor with this kid and it's something bad. With myself, I'm certainly different. And I think I'm opposite, where the one time I probably should have gone to the ER, I went to urgent care, and then they said, you need to go to the ER. And they're like, yeah, we can't help you here. But I think, offering those different, and I'm of the opinion, I'm not quite like a man where I'm like, never go to the doctor, but it seems like every time I go to the doctor or take the kids to the doctor for even just regular appointments, I walk away with something nastier than when I showed up. I just feel like the kids get so sick. You show up for a well check, a week later, we've got some nasty flu or cold or something. So
I know my husband loves to like humble brag that he, hasn't been to like a primary doctor's office, since he was in high school. I'm like, it's not a brag. That's not the flex that you think it is.
It's a guy thing, doctor.
But even so with the kids, one of my, gets a rash or something, and we can just FaceTime, and that saves a huge amount of money. It saves the doctor's time, and it's something, that can be handled. Same thing, with, I've exercised choice with my healthcare provider, and being able to just do that 15-minute phone call and say, look, I'm dealing with this. You know me. We have a relationship. Yep. it saves everybody money and time. And I think
we're finding that. That's the real pleasure in doing that kind of a relationship, where you just have a trusted, direct-to-patient doctor relationship, just the way it used to be. And but where things get clogged up, the minute patients have insurance and they want to use the insurance, those offices that do the direct primary care like ours, then you start getting clogged up trying to navigate that for patients. It's very, very difficult. But when it comes to the little kids, they're not as precise and nuanced in describing things. So it is important probably to overreact in that case. There's no doubt about that. I don't have a qualm with that. But we have some, this is the one place where there's no patients increasingly don't have skin in the game, and so they tend to overutilize services.
Yeah, and that's been really nice because I am on a health share, so I pay out of pocket for my health care. And so, when someone says you need this, I then ask, and so if you're on insurance, that's the end of the conversation. So they say you need this or this test or this whatever, then I ask the question, how much is that? And they say, oh yeah, I forgot. You're gonna, and then they walk me, and I said, so if I don't do that, what are the outcomes? Is there any alternative? And you would be shocked at the conversation that then follows when they know I'm in control of, and I'm going to have to foot the bill for the payment.
I wouldn't be shocked.
Well, you wouldn't be shocked.
You and I would have an interesting discussion there.
Most people are completely shocked.
You and I would say, look, I'm looking for a needle in a haystack. Are you willing to take the stick from the needle in the haystack if we don't get the test that might show something? And then that's your choice. Yeah. And I document it and say, counselor, I warned you. I'm looking for a 1 in 1,000. If you get the 1 in 1,000, it's going to be an I told you so moment. That's what happens there, which is fair.
Yeah.
Right? You have that decision. You play the odds.
But I would never, and I've learned so much, and I think it's benefited me in so many ways. And I think my encouragement to people is you're still allowed to have that conversation on insurance to talk about what does this cost,
And you should because of deductibles and stuff. Yeah.
You're still allowed to have that conversation and your doctor should have it with you. So ask more questions about, this path or this path or this path.
Yeah. Well, you can do that because you're in a direct relationship. But a doctor that's given a 15 or 20-minute visit, the nurse spends 10 minutes filling out the computer with doing all they have to do.
Asking me all of the questions about myself that I'm expecting them to already know.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, I get it. You're preaching to the choir here. And then the doctor has to document. So how much time is there for explanation? I spend an awful lot of time in this space just educating and having these discussions. And I love it. It's rich. It's beautiful. It's great. Most doctors in the medical industrial complex turnstile medicine system, it's not their fault, it's the system's fault. Well, it's their fault because they participate. Sorry, docs, calling you out. You should jump off the wagon and just tell the medical industrial complex, no, I'm about patients, not about bills and coding, but that's another discussion.
I don't understand. And then they're just like, are you depressed? I don't know. Like, you're the, and then how much do you drink or how much do you smoke? People just lie. I mean, that whole thing is just a dog and pony show.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, I don't understand our healthcare system, and we spend so much time talking about, like I would say we as in like the legislature, the federal government, in talking about lots of different things. And I feel like
But you're so right. When you're paying the bill, just like if you're getting a deck built or putting a roof on your house or getting a car repaired, you ask the questions. You're telling me I need shocks. Why do I need shocks? What's wrong with my shocks?
Yeah, when you have to pay.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
When I had a flat tire last week and they're like, I don't think we can repair this tire. I'm like, are you sure?
Yeah, right.
Like, show me why you can't repair this tire.
John, a great story, a heartwarming story about stranded boat riders on the Missouri River in Jefferson City, rescued by the fire department.
Yeah, they had a couple of incidents yesterday. That one was earlier on before the height of the storms. They had people's boat motor went out over near the Norn Access over by the bridge. The crews rescued the 4 stranded boaters, a couple adults, a couple kids. Mm-hmm. But then about 9:30 last night, they had it for real. Emergency responders had to pull some people out of flooded cars in Jefferson City.
Wow.
Along Edgewood Drive at Creek Trail Drive, if folks know where that is.
Yep.
One person even had minor injuries, had to go to the hospital.
Wow. Hey, I haven't had any text on people that had major hail damage. I'm surprised based on some of the pictures we were talking about earlier. The road and one person's deck was entirely covered by golf ball size hail. I mean, significant hail. So if you had any damage or you have pictures, send them our way. 874-9390. It's really
got some up on the Facebook page. One of our coworkers, Eric Bremer, sent us pictures from the ball field at Wardsville at Blair Oak School, covered with big.
So Jack
hailstones.
Jack texts us, so more hospitals should have no ERs? That's a non sequitur. I didn't say that. I said people overuse ERs when they don't have any, when they can use it and there's no expectation of payment. I mean, that's all I said.
Simmer down.
I don't need to simmer down. That's a non sequitur. Do you know what that means?
We like Jack.
Producer Hannah?
Are you trying to mansplain that word to me?
I think we are also getting some comments about, hey guys, don't use acronyms if you're not saying what they are. And so for the class, Randy, what's FRA stand for? Randy.
Federal
You do know
reimbursement
what that
allowance.
stands for,
Federal
right?
reimbursement allowance.
And
know
I
that,
think
yeah.
I made a boo-boo and I said the PSC, which stands for the Public Service Commission. It regulates investor-owned utilities. So
Yeah.
feel free to call us on that if we're using. I hate being in a room, and there are a lot of them, especially when you do a lot of work with government. When people are using acronyms and you're like, "What on earth?" You're trying to Google, and it usually doesn't come up. And you're
And
like, I don't know what that is.
WTF stands for.
Whoa. Enough there. John, maybe let's clean up the Hannah's Act here. Let's get back to some sensibility here.
Sorry.
What's up on your plate when you come back, John?
How about some out there alternative polling Schoolhouses, this one an hour drive from Des Moines, still serving its civic duty as polling place. Lawn Lanes Bowling Alley in West Lawn, Chicago. On the south side, known for its diversity, they've been a polling place for 12 years and a polling place for about 750 voters. Bring your own ball, but you have to rent shoes in order to vote. No, we don't know that. Ray Lounsbury's shed in Nevada Township, Iowa. Ray, who's just shy of his 100th birthday, opens up his tractor garage to voters. They've been doing it for 20 years. He also offers free drinks and snacks for those voters. And the Su Nueva Laundromat in Chicago, probably just because it's weird with dryers and change makers. And it's a polling place for 700 registered voters in Windy City. So to our political question of the day, have you heard about the new McDonald's new Biden Happy Meal?
No.
Order anything you like, and the guy behind you gets to pay for it.
Ooh.
Now you know the rest of that story.
Whoa, I like that. Does it come with ice cream, too?
Yeah, certainly, but only chocolate chip.
You
And
know,
it's awfully hard to swallow.
I was listening to our friend John Combest, who was talking about elections in St. Louis. And I was shocked to hear that a lot of schools there are closed today because they still have polling places in the schools. And John, I remember growing up, my parents coming to Morrow Heights Elementary, and we couldn't have gym class because all of those little, there used to be the stand-up boxes, which I don't see, now you just have like the piece of cardboard, but they had that whole, like it was the hanging chads machine, basically.
Yeah.
And more, I'd see all of my friends' parents come into the elementary school, and now, I think in mid-Missouri, everywhere, we
They're all
in
in the
Ashland,
end.
mainly churches, but I guess we do the opposite.
I used to vote in the downstairs lunchroom at St. Martin's Catholic Church.
Okay.
And I went in during the noon hour and had to watch the kids eating homemade yeast rolls while I was trying to concentrate on my ballot. That stuck with me.
And I guess I had thought that because with like school safety and everything, that's why they had kind of removed polling places because they didn't want a bunch of like unknown adults, in an elementary school, which I kind of appreciate. But apparently in St. Louis, that's still, so now they just you just are off school that day and they use your building as a polling place.
I remember that solidified the importance of voting, though. I remember being a student.
Yeah.
And, when I saw a polling place set up, you see the flags, people coming in, there's a structure to it. Generally, older folks sitting behind the table, verifying your eligibility. And while we didn't really understand all the formality of it, we knew that it was going on. And I think it helped. It was one of those reinforcements of the importance of citizenship and, your rights and responsibilities as a citizen to vote. So in a way, I sort of miss that. I wish, but you're right. I mean, nowadays you don't know. I mean, there's safety.
I got a great kick out of, I asked the kids, because it's their first day back yesterday from spring break, how was your day? What'd you do? And Amelia said, we had a debate yesterday. I thought, ooh, that's kind of fun. What'd you debate? She said whether the voting age should be 18 or 12. And I was like, wow.
18 or 12.
And I was like, how did you come out on that? And she said, well, I said 18 because if you're 12, your parents are just going to tell you how to vote and it's just 2 votes for them. And I thought,
whoa,
there's probably a lot of 18-year-olds who vote how their parents tell them
cow.
to. But I was like,
she knows mom and dad pretty well.
Yeah.
What that sounds like.
That's a fair point. And I thought, wow, they're teaching some good citizenship and public policy debates over there at Southern Boone.
Sometimes we ask you to participate in fish fries or fundraisers or various things, but one thing I hope you'll participate in is the Best of Columbia voting. It's open now, and I hope that you can log on every day onto InsideColumbia.net or 939theeagle.com. You can navigate to that voting opportunity there and vote for your various categories and your favorites in those categories. Best of Columbia voting is open. That voting is sponsored by Shangri-La Dispensaries, Heartland Homes Remodeling and Roofing, Creekside Pet Center. Love going out there. We've been out there and taken our mutts there. They do a great job. Haven't been to the Shangri-La Dispensaries. Don't know if I'd be going, actually. But for those of you who do, I hope that you'll honor them.
I can't even picture Randy in a dispensary.
But I recommend it a lot for patients. There's patients who do a lot better on marijuana than they do pharmaceuticals.
I think
the
earlier...
doctor lived through the 70s. Come on, don't sell it.
Never touched. I have never touch the stuff. The
And
closest
earlier-
I've gotten was on a bandstand to secondhand smoke.
Well, and earlier, Hannah, I think you were saying, settle down, Randy, settle down. I
Yeah.
mean, he would be much more mellow.
Your blood pressure might approve.
I don't need that. I don't need that. Thank you. Now, but most importantly, of course, you should vote, but we're going to focus you on one category. That is the on-air personality. And our
Your host, Randy Tobler.
Thank you for joining us again on Wake Up Mid-Missouri. Stephanie Bell, producer Hannah, Brian Hauswirth back in. The gang's all here. John Marsh. Feels good. It's like the family's all back together. It's great. And speaking of family back together, we consider Andrew Arthur, who is an expert in immigration policy and a former immigration judge from the Center for Immigration Studies, to be part of our family. Here's a little sound I want you to hear, Art, before we launch into this interview.
I know that DeSantis, they passed a big tough law last year, is very upset about immigrants being bused or traveling into his state, but they're flying in by the hundreds of thousands right under his nose.
Well, that was your colleague, Todd Bensman. And boy, there's a bombshell study just out at CIS.org. Welcome in, Art, and thanks for helping us unpack another subterfuge under the Biden administration.
Oh, you bet, Doctor, and greatly appreciated. I hope everybody had a good Easter and a happy Passover. The Center for Immigration Studies has been reporting on a program that most people don't know about. And this program flies 30,000 nationals of Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela into the United States per month. Now, keep in mind, Randy, none of these people have any visas. None of them have any rights to be in the United States. They simply go online, they apply, and the Biden administration allows them to enter the United States on 2-year periods of parole. They're still removable from the United States because they don't have any right to be here, but they can live and work here for 2 years. The Biden administration knows that none of those people, the 360,000 per year, a population larger than New Orleans, who it's bringing here, are ever going to leave. A large number of them are going to use public benefits. Some of them will apply for asylum. They'll all be able to work. So, but the Biden administration won't tell us what airports they're flying them into, and they won't tell us what airports they're flying from. Apparently, all that is hush-hush because bad actors could exploit that information. I have no idea why. It sounds like a dodge to me, but we're going to find out more in the coming weeks.
Well, I think what I found interesting about this report is we're talking, up now under this mass parole, which is itself an abuse of the intent of that program, which I think you've explained before for us is supposed to be sort of a case-by-case, parole, go sort of an end around the usual channels to get someone in. And they've just done this for 4 or 5 countries just on a mass basis, and it's not really counted in the numbers that we hear about crossing the border illegally. They make the illegality of it seem legal, I guess. That's to the layperson like me.
Yeah, and, it's even more interesting than that because President Trump, in his Super Tuesday, or former President Trump, the Super Tuesday victory speech, actually alluded to Todd's reporting about, how we don't know what airports these people are flying into, secretive program that they're running, and then Elon Musk tweeted it out. That was interesting, but the really interesting thing that happened was the blowback that both Musk and Trump received because CNN and AP launched into fact check, this isn't a secret program. Everybody knows about it. All these things are fake. Well, Randy, honestly, most people in this country have no idea that 360,000 illegal migrants are being allowed to fly into the United States every year. Yes, you can go online and find it. And yes, the center has talked about it, but you won't hear any reference to any of this in the press. And if you remember a few weeks back, actually a couple weeks back, there was a man who was charged with aggravated rape of a 15-year-old disabled girl in a state migrant shelter in Massachusetts. That fellow came into the United States under this program. This is a program that the Biden administration tells us everybody gets vetted ahead of time. Everybody has a sponsor. Well, I have a feeling this guy wasn't vetted very well, and I don't know that much vetting can take place. But with respect to the sponsor, this guy's sponsor was living in New Jersey. He was living in state housing in Massachusetts. So, this entire program needs more scrutiny, and yet the press is attempting to, evade scrutiny, tamp this down so that people don't know about it.
It's the immigration realm. It just smacks to me of the whole management style of the Biden regime. It's like the debt forgiveness, if it just using whatever kind of aggressive pushing of the limits of a statute, a regulation, a law to get their way. And it just doesn't ever smell right. And in the immigration, sphere, we have another example of it. It just doesn't feel right at all. Art Arthur from Center for Immigration Studies joins us, CIS.org, if you want to stay in touch with the latest and the very always underreported immigration goings-on in the world. That's the place to be.
Art, I saw a TV piece the other day, and they did a thing on the 1924 Johnson-Reed Act and how racist it was when it supposedly stopped all immigration from Asia and a lot of Eastern Europe and all. Do you think that carries any weight in this day and age? It certainly doesn't seem like it.
Well, it's interesting, John, because people go back in history and they look at that, through the lens of 2024, and they look back at that act. I'm not going to lie to you. There were overtly racist elements in that law, and they are reprehensible. But what that law did was, notwithstanding all of its flaws, is it gave the United States a pause after a massive wave of immigration. And this wasn't, and again, nearly everybody that came to the United States, certainly our forebears, were good people. But there were bad people that came in there too. And there was a wave of anarchy in the summer of 1920 that actually scared Americans. A lot of people don't realize this. A bomb was planted in front of Franklin Roosevelt's house. I think he was Assistant Secretary of the Navy or something like that. So there were real problems. And, we had just gotten done with the war in Europe. And, Congress wanted to, give a quick breather to the United States so that we could start to assimilate people. And we probably did the best job of assimilating Americans ever in history. Everybody who nearly all of the people who came before that period were good people, and they became good Americans. They are the bedrock of the United States. Right now, we have more foreign-born people in the United States than we've ever had in our history. We think of Ellis Island and the great wave of migration in the 1890s, 1900. This is bigger than that. And the Biden administration is adding to that population by about 1 million every year. And that's over top of the 1 million that Congress has said can enter the United States legally. We've never been in a situation like this. We've never been in a situation where illegal immigration was basically countenanced. So, we're not really sure how this is going to work out. There was, and again, look, I'm not going to defend any of the racist aspects of that 1924 law, but, it was a period of great growth in the United States. Wages grew. People were able to unionize because there was control on the labor that was coming into the United States. So, that sort of golden age of the 1950s that we think of, a lot of that was an intentional result of the 1924 law. Again, I in no way countenance anything that was done. And, it was just sort of random the way that they apportioned it. One other part of that law that people miss is the Western Hemisphere was completely exempt. This was really something that was directed toward Europe and the rest of the world. People could come and go from Central America, South America during that period of time. We actually did see an increase in immigration from those places. In fact, we saw a legal program that brought Mexican workers to the United States to work to supplement, the farms during the period in World War II when a lot of men primarily were off at war. So, controlled immigration is a great thing for the United States. There were amendments to the 24 law in 1965 that made it better. But, at the time that they passed that 65 law, Ted Kennedy, who was one of the proponents, said this isn't going to increase the level of immigration at all. Well, that's just not what happened.
It was a big deal for LBJ, wasn't it?
It was a huge deal for LBJ. This was part of the Civil Rights Act that he had signed. And again, there were a lot of net positives from that. But, one of the biggest net negatives was that it did allow in a lot of unskilled workers who did not bring any, skills to the United States. Right now, about 61% of all people who immigrate legally to the United States come through family. There's no guarantee that they have the skills that they're going to need to support themselves in the United States, let alone to grow our economy. United States citizenship is the most valued thing in the world, and we should treat it as such. But right now, the Biden administration is treating it like a broken gumball machine, where you just turn the handle and gumballs come flying out.
Art, we appreciate joining us live. Just a quick question from a historical perspective. You mentioned several laws in several years. I want to bring one up very quickly. 1986, President Ronald Reagan signed at the time, bipartisan immigration law. And I can remember senators in both parties predicting that the southern border would remain secure and that basically this was going to solve everything. And there was a lot. It was very bipartisan at the time. What happened? That did not live up to what they've said it was going to happen.
Yeah, and that's a warning for us going forward with any legislation that comes out. You're referring to the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986.
Alan Simpson, yes.
Alan Simpson's great achievement. Senator Simpson was a great man. The deal that was struck by President Reagan, Senator Simpson, and the Democrats was that there would be an amnesty, a mass amnesty of 4 million people, and it would be the last amnesty in American history. In exchange for that, we made working in the United States as a legal immigrant. You already couldn't work in the United States as a legal immigrant. We actually imposed restrictions on employers. That was the worksite enforcement plan. The problem with all of that was that in 1986, we didn't have computers. We didn't have the Internet. And so when employers verified the employment eligibility of people who came to work for them, they did it on paper and they stuck it in the file cabinet. There was no way for the then INS to access those documents. And then Congressman Barney Frank of Massachusetts added an additional provision that made it a crime to discriminate against somebody because you think they're an immigrant. And again, that's a pretty noble cause, but it ended up undermining that employment verification system. So we got the amnesty, we just never got the enforcement that we were promised.
It's interesting. That's not the first. That's not the last example of deals struck by. Well, remember George H.W. Bush economically, right? When he said, "Okay, I'll raise taxes if you restrict spending," that didn't happen. Mm-hmm. So it's not the first time that the Democrats haven't lived up to their end of a deal. We've got a minute, literally a minute, before we have to get to the market report. Art, but what's the status of SB 4 in Texas? We saw those illegal immigrants that beat up on the Texas National Guard for a brief while. That law was in place, then it was stayed. Where are we on that right now?
So right now, the law is currently stayed. There's going to be a hearing in 2 days in Texas before a three-judge panel of the Fifth Circuit on whether or not they should overturn an injunction of that law. They're probably not going to overturn the injunction of the law. In fact, the dissenting judge, Andrew Oldham, said, look, we know where this is going. What's probably going to happen is they will rule fairly quickly. Probably the three-judge panel will rule
Dow closed down 0.6%, NASDAQ up 0.11%. So communication services led the gainers yesterday pretty significantly, with real estate being the biggest loser. Now, we're going to keep it local this morning. I know we've already gotten a couple of texts, and I got a text yesterday from my father-in-law who likes to alert us. He sent a family group text. He said, go fill up right now. The gas prices are shooting up. And Hannah asked earlier, has anyone been, did anyone get fooled? And we got a fun text said, yeah, I got fooled. I went to the gas pump yesterday and had to fill up.
Womp womp.
Has anyone seen what it is this morning? It's like
$3.49 is what I saw.
That's rough.
So it was all that April Fool's demand that outstripped local supply? Or no, is that just coincidence?
No, I don't know.
As someone who just returned from a 10-hour road trip, ouch.
Ouch is right. All right. So some other local and Missouri-based news. I did see this story over the weekend, and I am pleased because we were talking about the PSC, which is the Public Service Commission, earlier. Today, they are over at the governor's office building, which a lot of folks know is like right there across from the governor's mansion there in downtown Jefferson City. They've got they have a little cafe there, and it's at times it's been very good, but it's been closed the last couple of years. There's a new business that just opened there called Serendipity Roasting Company, a little coffee shop. But I think it was interesting in that it was started by a 16-year-old. The 16-year-old wanted to, her name's Soraya, wanted to open a coffee shop. She saved her money and along with her parents first opened a location in Eldon during the pandemic. And this is their second location. They are, it's all in the family. Apparently, I think Big Brother, a brother works in the Jefferson City location, and there is another son who makes the sourdough. So I'm glad to have another option and see some of those spaces in downtown Jefferson City filled. So I thought, and I love seeing like young entrepreneurship. I think that's great.
An adult oriented version of the lemonade stand. That's great. Right?
Yeah, I love that.
Young people, that's super good.
The other Missouri news that is rolling on in is Silver Dollar City has a new roller coaster. They kind of duped us last year when they were like, come to Silver Dollar City because we're closing Fire in the Hole. And I went and I rode it and we took photos, and I was sad on the last ride because
you were really sad, actually.
I was really sad. It's one of the, I think I remember it was one of the first roller coasters I ever rode, and I'm not like a thrill seeker, as we know. So it's like it was on my level. Well, anyway, they just opened a new one, and it was $30 million. It is revamped Fire in the Hole. It is it's got 14 scenes and 3 drops, which might be too much for me.
There's a birthday cake out there, so I take a little slice of birthday cake. It's like a 2 by 2 centimeter square. I slice off the icing. I have a little bit of cake. Hope Helene isn't listening. And so so I'm having this conversation with our HR director. Okay, here, for those of you watching us on Facebook or YouTube, and so next to the birthday cake is a bowl of, you tell me, what does it look like?
Let me give you a pro tip. Don't eat the cupcakes either. Yesterday was April Fool's.
It looks like jelly beans. They look like Jelly Bellies. For those of you who remember, Ronald Reagan's favorite jelly bean was Jelly Belly. John, what does that look like? What does that look like? Jelly Bellies.
Jelly Bellies.
Okay, so if you were in the break room there and you saw these, would you not maybe partake of 1 or 2 or 3 of them?
I don't care much for jelly beans, to be truthful, but
I don't get them much. We don't have a lot of candy laying around.
Haven't we talked about this rule before, like not to put things in your mouth that you don't know what they are or where they came from?
If you don't know where it came from, or where it's been.
Now, see, this is the difference. This is the generational difference. I grew up in a time when people looked after one another, and they didn't do mean tricks on one another.
Nah, you're too naive, man.
I am naive and trusting. I really am.
Yeah.
And so,
like the guy at the concert who has a pocket full of Jelly Bellies and wants to give you one.
Well, now I was so I'm talking to the HR director, and the conversation is not. It was about we're going to give a scholarship down at the Jefferson City Common Scholarship Awards here in a week or two, and I'm going to go down and present one for KWS on behalf of the Zimmer Group.
Hopefully you're able to make it after.
And so
this.
you know how you can tell when you're having a conversation with someone that they're not really engaged in the content of the conversation.
She was definitely not listening to what you were saying.
No,
she was
that's
watching
right.
you chew the jelly beans, waiting for the reaction.
So as I will do, I'm sitting here and I'm eating jelly. I'm like, okay, and then I walk away, and she goes, "Do you realize what you just did?" I thought, "Oh my gosh, was there marijuana in these jelly beans? Did I actually now
gummies?
Did I partake of something I didn't want to?"
And by the time I show up, she is hysterically laughing at you.
She's hysterical.
I can hear this from down the hall,
You're
by the way.
very confused.
Then Steph, I'm like, what did I do wrong? I just had a couple of Jelly Bellies. Okay, ladies, would you please explain to me what happened here? Because they tasted like sort of bland jelly beans.
No, you need to take a handful of them like you did in the break room.
I took 3 of them, 3 or 4.
But did you eat them one at a time?
No, I just all
That's what
together.
I'm saying. You need to just throw them back.
Those are
Bean boozled.
Yeah, bean boozled.
What does that mean?
Beans. It's from a game where you have to basically play roulette. Mm-hmm. And you can either get a good one or a bad one. We have been informed that those are all the bad ones. And so you've probably got you got a green one that could be booger. You got a pink one.
Could be grass.
Toothpaste. There's a white one. There's
the
milk.
puke one is the famous one.
Yeah.
I've never heard. Well, how naive am I, Brian? Have you ever heard of?
No, I haven't either.
And I am not.
Why would a coworker play a cruel trick on someone? I mean,
because yesterday was April Fool's. You got to be on high alert. And I played with my kids, and I am not a big
and
I don't gag
it was
easily.
HR too, right?
Yeah, HR of all people.
Those will make you gag.
Now I'm working in a hostile work environment. It turns out.
But I think Becky asked you, "Hey, was there anything wrong with those? How are those jelly
she
beans?"
said,
And you're like, "Oh, they're great. I love vomit flavored jelly
They
beans.
didn't taste like vomit. I mean, we all know what vomit tastes like. I mean, after all, Hannah knows what pass gas tastes like. She said that
Cauliflower
Yep. tastes like that, so I don't know. Well, I don't know. So, Brian, did you have one of these beans?
I did not have any, no.
Okay, well,
I saw them out last night when we were doing storm coverage, but no, I didn't have any of those.
Go ahead, Randy. Eat them.
I'll eat an orange one.
No, toss them back
I'm
like
eating
you
an
did.
orange one.
Is that a bad one?
No. Tastes like citrus.
Wow.
I think even if it was gross, he wouldn't tell us.
He would lie.
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I'll take it out if you want to share.
No.
Let me look up what the nasty orange one could be.
It tastes like citrus. I'm telling you, it tastes like orange. All right. Brian, what happened at the council meeting last night? There's big stuff about roundabouts, right?
Yeah, there was, and kind of traffic control is kind of a general theme. So 2 things that came up last night at the council meeting. And no surprise on the first one, they approved, they being the Columbia City Council, $1.7 million new roundabout. at Route K in Old Plank Road. That's in South Columbia, not far from Rockbridge Elementary. I still call it the Little General store there. There's several gas stations, but it's a safety issue, according to DeCarlin Seawood. Not a whole lot of really controversy about that. They have the money for that. There was also a discussion about speeding in certain parts of the city, and one of the areas they're looking at, this will come up at the next council meeting, Randy, is Rice Road, basically from, Hanover Road, right there at the Dollar General at Clark Lane, not far from the Golden Corral that shut down. That area all the way to Rice Road. It's residential. You got elderly people. You got a nursing home in there, and then you got a lot of kids. I've seen the speeds. The report is in there. People sometimes are going close to 50 miles an hour in a residential area. So they're looking at 6 speed bumps there to try to stop some of that. Outside of that, Clayton Farr Jr. was honored last night. He was basically recognized. And then essentially it was the last meeting for Rachel Prophet. I guess technically she'll come to the next meeting, maybe just very briefly. But she, just for lack of a better term, she was interim. She was appointed in November. She said she wasn't going to run for a full term. So that was her last full meeting because we've got a second ward race tomorrow. So that's really it. No, I wouldn't say anything earth-shattering, but still important issues nonetheless, the roundabout being the biggest one.
So, again, speaking about the city council, today is a recall vote,
Yes.
right, for Mr. Knoth.
It is a recall election. I would argue this is
rare.
It's very rare and historic if it happens. He is in the race for his life right now. Anthony Wilroth, who a gentleman that you've talked about before, is involved. There are some other people involved in this recall effort. They believe that he has a conflict of interest because he has taken a job as a lobbyist with the realtors. Now, Knoth has been on this station several times, including on Columbia Buzz with Mike Murphy. He says there is no conflict of interest. He says anytime there's an issue that comes up, he recuses himself, and he has. He's not voted on anything that would impact him, and they would argue it's still conflict because they don't have a voice on the council. So
who's they?
They being activists in the first ward of the people.
So, well, you're not allowed to have a profession and then to recuse yourself. What do people not understand about conflict of interest, right? It's very common that someone has a conflict of interest, either personally or professionally or financially.
Yeah.
Competition professionally, a financial stake in a contractor that's being contemplated, whatever, or a family member. You recognize it, and then you just back off. And there's nothing wrong with having a conflict of interest. That happens. You just recognize it, and then you're gone. And he's done that as far as I know.
Yes.
There are certain things that, and you have to report it to the Missouri Ethics Commission as a sitting person, who pays you, how do you get paid, all of those things. And then you're also entitled to not vote if you ever even think there might be an appearance of a conflict, maybe. And a lot of this stuff too, you might disclose something of your household income, like your spouse. I think I've only not voted once in Ashland. Ashland hasn't tried to do any business with the trolley company.
Yeah.
But I did, Salter Lawn does the yard service. And as most people know, I read some endorsements here for Salter Lawn Service. I said, I don't want there to be any question that I'm voting for Salter because they choose to do business with the radio station or whatever. Right. And so I recused. It was a unanimous vote without me. They moved on, and no.
That's
and it's the contract they've had for many years. So
the focal point of this particular, though, I think recall is really around the bed and breakfast and the what's it called, VRBO, or that whole deal.
Really, it depends on who you talk to, and there are a lot of people that believe it actually is about defunding the police. There are people that feel like I've heard Fred Perry had a really interesting show with Bob Roper, and they obviously, when we say defunding, they didn't defund, but it's not a priority for Fowler, for instance, the former councilwoman, to fill all those vacant positions at CPD 37. Knoth is endorsed by the CPOA. So it depends. There are some that, some of the activists don't like his position, maybe on the police funding. Some feel that they do believe that he has a conflict of interest. So we'll see what happens. He is not as progressive probably as they'd like to be. And I would make 2 very quick points on this. Number one, in Jefferson City, and John knows this, we've been at the Capitol for years, there are labor and business people, and I'm just picking two. There are farmers. Let's just pick three, and I'm leaving a bunch of people out. There are farmers that are legislators. There are labor people that are bricklayers, like my father. My father's not a legislator. There are business people. They vote on business and labor issues. They vote on. They don't have to recuse themselves. I'm not saying they're doing anything wrong. I'm just saying this man has recused himself. He's not voted for anything, and it's just an interesting argument they would make. Tom Rackers, when he was the mayor of Jefferson City, he worked for a company called Sprint, which is now, I believe, called CenturyLink. And actually, when he was mayor, if Sprint came up, he would actually leave the council meeting and go where he couldn't hear anything. He would actually leave the council meeting. And I don't know if, ultimately, I don't know what these people want. But I think maybe, do they want it where you don't have a job on the side? I mean, because you could, I guess, have retired people down there.
You can find fault with just about every profession if you wanted to.
Exactly. And by the way, the mayor of Jefferson City, I'm just using it as an example. Fitzwater works for the Pharmacy Association. I'm sure a pharmacy, if they had a contract, and I don't expect them to, but he'd have to recuse himself, and he would.
Well, what about when they vote on benefits packages for city employees? Technically, those benefit packages there's some decision making in terms of how generous or not to be with your pharmaceutical benefits on your employee health plan. So, I mean, is he supposed to recuse himself? And he can. Maybe he does. I don't know. But there's a way to manage this. And I think these ad hominem attacks going after people, for people that themselves don't want to throw their hat in the ring, I find that problematic. I would challenge Mr. Wilroth to run for office. You find it very convenient to throw arrows and barbs and stones at everyone else, from the police department to the council, whatever. Why don't you run? Just run. See if you can get elected. And then let's see if you like the heat in the hot seat, because it's tough when you walk even a foot in another man's moccasins.
And Anthony obviously is very outspoken, and he does call into the Como Buzz show on Sunday morning. And let's be fair here. It's not just Anthony. There are several activists, and there are some citizens as well that have taken this on. So Kenoth, I don't know how he's going to need a bigger turnout. If it's a low turnout, my gut feeling is he could be, his seat could be in jeopardy. Yeah. But I see what you're saying on that. It is a really tough job as a council person. You don't get a lot of thanks, those meetings are very long, by the way.
Well, however, whether you're on the anti-Kenoth side or the pro-Kenoth, whether you're for a property tax freeze on senior citizens, whether you're for the no tax increase bond issue for the Ashland schools, whatever. Columbia Public Schools, Mr. Potter's running. Some have said, I've seen a lot of things. You don't have to vote for 2. You can vote for up to 2. Well, if you're not happy with the other vote for 3 and hope for 2. I don't know. Just get out and vote. Let's make it better than 19%, and in Jefferson City, better than 10%. Let's do that. That's
right. And I think regardless of where people come down on that, that's exactly right. And that is what Lisa Meyer was trying to say at the Lincoln days. It really wasn't, although she outlined she wants to hire 37 police to fill those jobs, but her big thing, and again, I repeat, she got the loudest ovation of anyone there. You are part of the problem if you don't show up to vote today.
Yep. Well,
and the place went, the applause in that room was huge.
That's where we all put on our really tearing the place up last night as they beat LSU, the standing national champs in women's basketball. She's an amazing, amazing basketball player. I'm not really a big basketball guy. I just be honest with you, but I find this story fascinating, and I'm just so happy that she's just really bringing women's sports to the fore. It really, I think, brings out the importance of us protecting women's sports. You know, can you imagine if there was some trans person with the same skill set and height and whatever, you know, would she be the same person she is in terms of her basketball accomplishments? I don't know.
There's no
doubt. A lot of people here have no idea how big women's basketball is in Iowa.
Yeah.
I mean, it's huge.
Yeah, there's no doubt she's probably going to be the greatest player of ever, like for women's basketball, right? I mean, it's just insane, her amount of skill. I would say I've seen little flashes that people have highlighted on Twitter of some behavior that I would wish that was different.
There's even clips of her father on the sidelines reacting to that same behavior in a similar fashion.
Telling her to cool it.
Yes.
What behavior? I'm sorry.
I think there was some yelling at the refs, which really irks me
that's
big
not
time.
Good. That's not good.
And
she's quite the type A personality.
I wasn't
on
aware
the
of
court.
that.
Yeah.
John McEnroe kind of behavior.
And there was another clip that I saw where like somebody was like on the ground and she didn't like offer a hand to help them up and just like walked right by, like very focused, you know. And so, I mean, I think the gravity of knowing that everyone's watching her, especially young girls, I think there are some times that I wish she would have done better.
Well, especially when you have that kind of visibility and celebrity and people are looking up to you as a role model. There's no doubt about that. That's
At the
a good
same
comment.
time, she plays a lot of basketball. And so, you know, if you were otherwise, you know, the yelling at the ref, I think that needs to cool it. But we gave
her dad would agree with you.
But we also gave Travis Kelce a pass for yelling at Coach Reed.
True.
So if he gets a pass in your book, then she should get a pass.
Maybe both can be true. She's a great basketball player, but she also needs to grow up and learn some manners on the court.
Perhaps.
Both can be true. What irked
Look
me.
at pro athletes over the years. Deion Sanders and all his